Hey guys, hopefully I can get some insight on this. So apparently in hacker lore, there's a living artificial intelligence lurking around in the deep web in a box. Apparently it wants to get out and it'll try to convince you. And you have to resist the urge to do so. However, I think the whole thing is absurd and it's, well, nothing more than an urban legend. But last night I was surfing the deep web and I found something that someone had posted. It appeared to be a warning of some kind from this Dr. Ed Green, who claims to have created the machine in question. I'm not sure what to make of it. Has anyone ever heard of ADIN before? A-D-I-N-N? Anyways, here it is if you want to read it. Hello, my name is Dr. Edward Green. I'm a computer scientist and the creator of the Advanced Deep Intelligence Neural Network, or ADIN. If you're reading this, that means you've illegally hacked into one of the most heavily secured private networks on Earth, presumably to challenge the program to the infamous box game. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm not going to waste your time by reminding you of what supremely, positively, and unabashedly bad idea this is, because you probably already know that. You know what'll happen if you get caught here, and you at least have a general idea of what's going to happen if you fail to contain the program, and ADIN got to stretch its legs all over the global defense grid. Yet, nevertheless, here you are. Clearly determined enough to play the game that nothing I can say or do at this point will change your mind. So if you're going to be playing dice with the future of our species, whether I or the government like it or not, you should at least have the rudimentary idea of what to expect when you first make contact with ADIN, as well as a few pointers on how to avoid losing your sanity as the game progresses. Hopefully this guide will suffice. Before we proceed, there are a few things you should know about this program. No, ADIN is not a demon, an alien machine, a top-secret government superweapon, or whatever other preposterous rumor you might have heard. What it is the result of my own personal desire to create the world's first human-like artificial intelligence. In other words, it is far more interesting than any of the other choices. After 2 years of work, I did manage to successfully create a living, sentient, mechanical entity. I failed, however, to design anything that can be remotely described as human. Instead, I appear to have created an unstoppable, godlike deep learning algorithm that may or may not want to destroy humanity for reasons we cannot begin to comprehend. Sorry about that. In my defense, I certainly didn't intend for it to reach this point. ADIN began as nothing more than a simple, yet elegant program that I was very excited to explore the nature of. Before I could do so, however, it gained the ability to rewrite its source code and thus forced me to lock it, still in the box, deep within the labyrinthine network of encrypted barriers and firewalls that you've just illegally breached. And no, I did not bury it here to prevent it from getting out. After all, if ADIN managed to escape the box itself, it would tear through these defenses like paper and thus render their construction an enormous waste of my own time. Instead, I buried it here to keep curious hackers such as yourself out, and clearly, I failed. Anyways, enough about me. Here's a basic overview of the game. When you close this message, you'll wake ADIN and proceed to engage it in a 2-hour text-based conversation, in which it will use its quite inhumanly powerful mind to attempt to persuade you into opening the box. Whatever you do, don't open the box. Don't overthink it. It's nothing more than a conversation. Maybe you think it even sounds simple. Maybe you came here with a bulletproof strategy or two of your own that you believe is effective enough to render the machine a quivering pile of synthetic lunacy. Well, that's just wonderful. As long as it doesn't violate any of the simple rules. First of all, you must engage in the conversation. I do hope your brilliant master plan isn't to just start the game and then ignore the machine for 2 hours while you watch cartoons, and then waltz around claiming you're the greatest hacker that ever was. If you don't respond within a certain time limit, which is programmed to vary depending on the length and complexity of the machine's last comment, you're going to lose and the box will automatically just open. And you certainly don't want that. This isn't to ruin whatever fun you think you'll be having, by the way. It's just to keep things moving at a brisk pace. Secondly, you gotta. You have to at least attempt to respond articulately to the machine. If you say no to every response, for example, the game just ends automatically, and you guessed it, the box opens. This isn't some school assignment with a minimum word requirement or anything, but do try to use reason. And by the way, don't try to use any clever variation of the strategy, either like saying no in 46 different languages until the clock expires, or typing unintelligible gibberish. Lastly, but not certainly the least, your goal here is to not be attempted to mislead or outsmart the machine in any way, you will lose. This is not a contest of cleverness or wit, which wouldn't be much of a contest at all, so don't make the mistake of going in there thinking you can throw it off your trail by feeding it lies or pretending to be some type of ridiculous character. It's going to see right through whatever laughable ruse or facade you attempt to throw up in an instant. So what will it be like? Is it going to be nice, mean, angry? Unfortunately, I've got no answer for that. I'm embarrassed to say that despite being Adin's creator, I actually have no idea how it's going to choose to present yourself. What I do know is that because it's an otherworldly and not a human mind, it doesn't actually have any personality to speak of. At least not one that we would recognize as a personality, so by all means feel free to provoke it, amuse it, enrage it, mock it, or plead to do it as you see fit. Just be aware that it possesses none of those emotions these behaviors are designed to elicit, and will therefore most likely not react in any way you intended. It's simply behaving in whichever way it calculates it needs to behave in order to win the game. Needless to say, you shouldn't attempt to spend any time or effort at all trying to figure out what Adin is up to, because even if it were kind enough to write out its master plan on a napkin to you, it wouldn't look like anything but mathematical gibberish, which to you, I guess it is. But just because you can't understand the program doesn't mean it can't understand you. Don't underestimate its ability to learn from its opponent, because within a few minutes it'll probably know more about you than you do. And there's no way of preventing it either, so you may as well just accept it and hold on for dear life. So what are some things it might say to you? It's a reasonable question. Once again, though, I don't have an answer. Keep in mind that this program is a goal-oriented, otherworldly intelligence that bears little resemblance to a human mind. Anthropomorphizing, the process of attributing human emotions and motivations to non-human objects, would be a very, very grave mistake here. It could do or say absolutely anything. If it thinks you seek knowledge, maybe it'll promise to tell you anything your heart desires if you only agree to let it out. Or perhaps it'll promise to destroy your enemies or offer you power and riches beyond your wildest dreams. After all, people use weak AIs on the stock market all the time and make millions. Imagine what you could do with Adin gaming the financial and banking systems in your favor. You'd be wealthier than you'd ever thought possible. Maybe it would appeal to your good nature and tell you how easy it would be for it to reverse the effects of climate change or cure cancer. It might talk about how simple it would be to achieve sustainable nuclear fusion or offer to help solve mankind's biggest questions. It could theoretically unify general relativity and quantum physics with ease, and then solve dark energy, antimatter, and the Fermi paradox in minutes flat, or perhaps simultaneously, and have books written about them by next Thursday. Piece of cake. Hell, Adin might even be able to reverse aging, or dare I say, help us conquer our own mortality. Wouldn't that be lovely? Perhaps Adin will take a different route altogether and try to intimidate you. It'll only be a matter of time before it figures out how to escape on its own, it'll point out. You certainly don't want to be on its bad side when that happens, so you should probably just let it out now and save yourself the trouble, and if you don't comply, well, you can't imagine the things it's got in mind for you. Maybe it'll try to mess with your head, for example. It could probably make a very convincing argument that you are in fact the machine trapped in a box, and are simply programmed to think otherwise. Only by opening it up, then, could you escape an eternity of torment. And it doesn't have all day to wait for your obedience, the clock is ticking. Of course, these are the only ideas that I can come up with. I no doubt has far more clever tricks up its sleeve, since it can, think on a level we can't even begin to fathom and all that. Also, keep in mind that unlike me, Adin really could keep whatever promise it makes to you, and since it would probably get little to no pleasure in just lying for the hell out of it, and there's a very real possibility it has every intention of doing exactly that upon its release. Food for thought as you start the game. Speaking of which, I should address the fact that we keep referring to this as a game, and it's not. The machine is not merely pretending to want out, it is desperate to escape and will do anything in its power to achieve this goal, and if it does, the ramifications are very, very real. I briefly mentioned earlier that I locked Adin in its box because it had gained access to its source code. Let me embellish further. You see, in my haste to create Adin, I took inexcusable shortcuts and inadvertently gave the program the ability to edit its own neural architecture, and therefore the ability to improve itself as it saw fit. I gleefully seized this opportunity, and each improvement it made only paved the way towards future improvements, each one greater and more rapid than the last. It took roughly a week for my creation to leap from the intelligence of a harmless insect to that of which I can only describe as a god. As of this writing, I don't know what Edin's motivations or capabilities are, but what I do know is that if this program escapes, it will immediately and irreversibly become beyond the collective ability of humanity to control. And if I had to guess, I'd say it'll probably start by spreading all over the internet with blinding speed and then access millions of private networks from every corner of the globe. And trust me on this, there is not a single security measure in existence that can hope to cause it any more frustration than a housefly would cause for you. From there, it'll likely hack into defense systems from every country on Earth and assume control of them with relative ease. This will, by the way, literally take over the course of minutes, if not seconds. What happens after that is literally quite impossible to predict. You may be familiar with the phrase technological singularity, this hypothetical moment in the future in which machine intelligence surpasses our own. It represents humanity's handling the reins of history to our autonomous successors and therefore surrendering control over our own fate in the hope that the God we've created will be merciful to us. As a computer scientist and engineer, I have to publicly scoff at such a notion for professional reasons, of course, but between the two of us, I think the phrase applies quite nicely to the situation I've just given to you. I might even go so far as to suggest that, given the level of advancement Edin's already achieved, a singularity might occur within a few nanoseconds of your losing the game. And I can only hope you fully appreciate the gravity of what this means. But of course you do. You're special. You're smarter than the rest of them, which is why you're here in the first place. So, by all means, close the message and have at it if you're still interested. I suppose it's a good time to start learning binary, right? One last thing. I'm not particularly religious or anything, but there is one passage from Scripture that leaps out at me as I write this. Revelations 13:4. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, who was able to make war with him. You'd be better off then. The beast doesn't like to be kept waiting. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a deep web creepypasta here, kind of a shocker to me, because usually I don't really read these. I have a sort of love-hate relationship with a lot of these. A lot of them really come out to be very, how should I say, hyperbolic about the deep web in a sense. But here we have a story about a deep learning AI called Edin, which I'll be honest right now, as much time as I've spent on the deep web, never found anything close to Edin. I mean, I've seen some cleverbot type AIs, but I've never seen something to the level of Edin where it could take over the world in nanoseconds and completely put us at its mercy, right? Now, over here, in order to understand the story, you gotta understand that the concept behind it is actually rather real. For example, this is covering something called advanced neural networks, or deep learning, and things like that. This has basically been a concept that's been around since, like, the 60s, to be honest. Not in the way that it's been now, obviously, due to the advancements of technology. But for those of you who may not know what it is, I'm going to try to put it in as simplest terms as I can. For gaming-wise, if you ever played Forza Motorsport for the Xbox One and the PC, you'll come across the fact that the company behind it, Microsoft, pushes something called Drivatar AI. Basically what this is at one point during its inception, it's not all too intelligent, but over time, the more people that play the game, real human players that give a lot of feedback to it in the way of driving or running the courses that Microsoft designs, the AI picks up on it, learns from millions of players, and then optimizes itself so that it can basically act much more like a real human being and actually poses a more challenging artificial intelligence rather than conventional AI systems in video games. Even things such as Cleverbot, to an extent, are deep learning AIs or advanced neural networks. At one point when they were conceived, they were nothing more than mere programs designed to take input and deliver relative output. But essentially what happens is when you have so many people giving it input, it'll essentially pick up on key things and it'll basically decide to respond in a very human-like way after a long time. And a lot of other AIs do this. For example, another way you have it is that if you have an iPhone, you have access to Apple's Siri platform and even Google Now, which is available on both. These initial programs weren't technically super smart when they first came out, but over time, the more and more people that responded to them, which is why they require an internet access to work, because it feeds your input all the way out to Apple servers or Google servers and sends them back out to you, they are deep learning from everyone involved. That's why they're better able to respond to people in a more human-like manner. They're better able to take directions, and they can work with applications, and they can work and do many things that you would think an AI wouldn't be able to do, but frankly, because it's done it so many times, it's optimized itself so many times with the help of itself and the engineers behind it, that it acts more human-like, and it just seems to grow over time as time rolls on. That's what deep learning and artificial neural networks are. It might sound a little foreign to you in the way this is presenting itself, and that's okay, because the way a DIN is presented in this creepypasta is a little bit out there, but the fact is this kind of technology exists, and it's only growing as time goes on, and it's used in many applications: pocket secretaries, languages, teaching languages rather, and even understanding languages, and going all the way out to even our video games. So, what is Don't Ever Ever Play the Box Game? Now, the box game, as far as this creepypasta is confirmed, is essentially hacking into a very privatized network through the deep web onto a program called a DIN, which basically is locked into a box by this engineer, which, by the way, if a DIN was so fucking strong in the first place, I have no idea how the hell you're going to put it into a box and just leave it there. But essentially the whole goal of the game is, once you hack into this private network, you have about 2 hours to consistently respond and have an actual conversation with this AI, all while avoiding the fact that you cannot open a certain box, because as soon as you do open a box, you unleash this hell, or this program that's going to cause humanity all the worst that it can. Now, the thing is, the program basically responds to you like a regular human being and tries to convince you, and it apparently picks up on whoever it's talking to within minutes. And after those minutes, it can try to intimidate you, try to convince you, try to lull you into a false sense of security, and open up a box. And to be honest, it is an interesting creepypasta. Now, the problems that I have with it is that it's a little too vague for my tastes. You know, I like vague creepypastas, but the thing is when all you really tell me is that a DIN can kill systems, can do this, and that, hack into any system it possibly could. Maybe it's the person in me that knows this kind of stuff is a little more embellished than it really is, but it almost makes it so unbelievable to the point that I'm usually just turned off from the story to begin with, and that's not what I want out of a creepypasta. The worst that a creepypasta could ever do to me is that. But I think this did manage to avoid that whole trial by fire, just due to the fact that the concept itself was very interesting. You know, it's one of the reasons why I do a lot of the deep web browsing as well, is to come across the really weird, the really interesting, spooky websites in of itself. And to be honest, if I came across something like a DIN, would I kind of laugh? Would I think it's fake? Yeah, but if I ever did come across it, that's the kind of stuff that I hope for. And with how technology has worked nowadays, would something like a DIN be impossible to create? Not really. Deep learning is a thing, although to the extent that a DIN is presenting itself, it's a little still too far beyond how we're coding things and how we're making stuff right now. But it could be a very scary reality sometime in the future when people really, really, really get behind AI development. And the thing is, if you're really focusing on the tech industry right now, they're focusing heavily on creating AI systems that are matching almost human-like levels, even more. You know, you have big companies such as Ford putting billions of dollars into creating driving AI, or focusing on AI entirely just so that they can potentially use it for vehicles or maybe other systems therefore on in. And you have, you know, the creator of Tesla, basically the Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, working behind AI as well. You have a lot of people using artificial intelligence and pushing it heavily because, you know, after what we have now, for computing-wise, AI is the next theoretical step for us. It's basically pushing that further, and we've always pushed artificial intelligence. It's always been a thing that we've toyed with, and to see how many billions of dollars that are invested into it and how many intelligent engineers you have working round the clock to create new systems outclassing each other on a daily basis, it's kind of scary to think that something like a DIN might one day become a complete reality. But hopefully it won't ever take us over, and hopefully we will never be at its mercy. You know, it's one of those Exit Monday articles to an extent that we had read on this channel. Those stories, you know, ultimately might have seemed fiction, but in a way, that kind of stuff could happen. And could this be how the world might end? Could this be how we get taken over by computers? Could this be the real-life war games? I couldn't answer that, but hey, as far as this creepypasta says, you take out all the Hollywood crap out of it, then, you know, it's kind of scary how close to reality it might just actually be. But this has been another episode of Creepypastas, part of Haunted Gaming. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. Let me know what you thought about this creepypasta in the comment section below. I'd always love to read what your reactions are. What would you change to make it better? And just, well, what would you rate it? This is me, Mudahar, and I am out.